So let me just do a quick introduction and then kind of jump in from there. So I am a community psychologist, and out of graduate school, I know we had the session before about kind of academia versus non-academia, and I was definitely on an academic track, and I jumped off before even walking in the door and said, this is not the thing that I'm going to want to do. I need to be more community-based. And I ended up taking a position at an applied nonprofit research firm in the Twin Cities. Moved here from grad school, from out of state, not knowing anyone. Said, I'm going to do this for 3 years, and then I'm going to leave Minnesota because I knew I needed to be on a coast or in the mountains. And so I was like, 3 years, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to learn what this is, this applied community kind of based research, and then take it from there. And 22 years later, I finally left that position. But when I was there, this is a firm, we hovered between 100 and 125 people. I was a senior manager there, which meant I kind of directly supervised about 20 of them. But I also had some overall management roles in terms of kind of overall agency direction. And one of the things that was really clear to me in this position was we had so much talent. We had content experts, we had methods experts, we had all of these great resources. We had an analysis team, we had communications and reporting teams, we had a data collection unit that could help do data collection. Everybody was so bright and so skilled and so passionate. And the office, it was this den of chaos all the time. We would have about 500 projects going at a time. Everybody was always really stressed. Projects were, bottlenecking in certain places, or people were, working, 3 days without a break to try to hit deadlines. And I was a little stumped about how to help fix some of this. And I ended up kind of stumbling into project management as a discipline, which I didn't know much about. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. But I ended up developing and implementing this kind of enterprise-wide project management model that we embedded into all of our strategies, from conceptualizing projects to how we were bidding, how we worked together in the design process, how we communicated and coordinated throughout the project. We realigned all of our policies and procedures into a different kind of project management flow, and it made a tremendous difference. About 2 years ago, I left that position, became a solo practitioner. So I have a firm called Community Research Solutions. It's a one-person shop by design at this point. I do mostly children's mental health related work, but not exclusively. So a lot of services, system change work, needs assessments, a lot of mental health equity work in the Twin Cities. I also am co-director of the Midwest Center for School Mental Health, which is a partnership between a clinically oriented person and myself, and I do all of the kind of the research and needs assessment sides of that agency as well. But I wasn't sure coming into this position how much all this project management training was going to be useful. I was really used to thinking about it in terms of how do we coordinate 100 people to get a lot of projects done at the same time in a way that is efficient and organized. But over time, I have found that there's some things that are less useful or less relevant when you're not trying to coordinate with so many people. There's obviously still coordination. I coordinate with clients, I coordinate with collaborators. I have people that I partner with on projects, or people that I'm subcontracting projects to. So there's still a team, but it's a little different now. But there's still quite a lot of this project management stuff that has become so deeply embedded into the way that I think about the work that I still really rely on these strategies, even if it's a project that I'm only doing by myself, et cetera. The way that I think about it is kind of my before and after approach to skill development, that I think, I had identified all these things that I wanted to do really well to be a professional researcher or evaluator. Because I do more content specific things. I know some of us are very intentionally generalists and some are more specialists. I need to stay up on what's happening in the field and in my industry. Obviously, being skilled at research and evaluation methods, like business and management skills, which it used to be how to manage and supervise large teams and do large agency direction. And now it's how do you actually run your own independent consulting firm. All of the interpersonal skills and how to work effectively with people and all the technical skills. And all of those things I think are important, but they weren't enough for me to feel like work was proceeding always the way it should. And so for me, adding some skill development related to project management helped tie all these other things together, that it didn't really matter if I really knew how to design a good project, if I couldn't get that project implemented. And it didn't matter, how good my interpersonal communication skills were if I wasn't applying those skills very effectively and efficiently within the project. So I know we have, at least the one certified project management professional. I am not a PMP. What I have is a certificate, a continuing education certificate in project management. I did go and kind of do a 40-hour training course, but I am not certified. I thought about it for about 5 minutes. And to be a certified project management professional, you not only have to take a test, but you have to do, continuing education type credits and keeping your certification up. And in the position I was in, it carried absolutely zero weight in the office. There wasn't going to be a professional benefit to me to have that certification. So I am not certified. I also have a very, very pragmatic and non-dogmatic approach to this. Karen can probably talk about it. The Project Management Institute has a lot of structures that they say, basically, you need to do these things if you're going to do project management. I had a hard enough sell kind of getting my agency to want to do any of this that we basically said, well, let's just focus on what are the strategies, what are the approaches that best address the places where we are struggling. And I pick and choose. I do some of it in a light version. I think really diehard project management folks would not always agree with me, but that's where I come from. And like so many other things that we talk about here, this is way too big of a topic to do it justice in this time. So I'm not even going to try. I want to start out just with kind of like, what is this discipline that we're talking about? And then I was going to just kind of highlight a couple of my go-to project management strategies. These are not my only ones, but kind of the things that I do on every project routinely. And then I'm also going to talk about some resources that I have available that are available for download if they would be of interest to you. So when we're talking about project management, obviously it is its own discipline. It's not just I have a project and I'm getting it done, but thinking about this discipline of project management and what are the specific kind of skill sets and tools that we need to get a project, from this conceptualization through completion in a way that is effective and successful. And trying to do things in a way that aligns with whatever those project requirements were. Project requirements can vary depending on the project. For me, both in my kind of before world, working in this agency and also on my own, these are just some of the things that I might be looking for in a project, that I got it done on time. If I said I would do it in 6 months, did I get it done in 6 months? Did I do it within the budget that I had available? Are the things that I developed good? Did I cut corners on quality, or did I really develop materials and projects that I and my partners and my collaborators, my clients all agree were good? Are people satisfied working with me? Do people feel like they got the right amount of attention and support, and that I was fulfilled my obligations to them, and that I was easy to work with, all of those things. And then I also build in this one around stress, that I know when I am not effectively managing my projects, all of a sudden I'm working more late nights, I'm working more weekends, I'm feeling anxious about trying to catch something up, or feeling like I'm really in danger of not hitting a timeline that I wanted. So for me, I try to be very conscientious about, am I implementing this in a way that feels manageable, and it felt like I could get the work done in the context of all the other work that I'm doing. There is kind of a side area of specialization around portfolio management, which might be interesting to do a topic on sometime too. If you have multiple projects and they're not independent entities, and thinking about, get one project going awry, running that risk of impacting lots of other projects that were fine, but now they're not because one other thing in this portfolio became an issue. So I pay a lot of attention to stress for myself and for people that I'm working with, and are we feeling okay about the work being done? And the word overly is important there too. Like it's not that I was never stressed about getting the work done, but is it detrimental? Is it, impacting my ability to, am I overtired? Am I grouchy because of the way I'm handling my projects, et cetera? And then, project management has a lot of different tools and techniques, kind of from that initial initiation. How do we identify a project? How do we make a decision about whether or not to pursue that project? How do we kind of establish and negotiate that initial scope of work? How do we plan out all the details so that we're confident that we have a reasonable strategy for getting it done? The actual execution, monitoring and controlling, which you do kind of throughout the whole process, and then how we close a project. And there's pieces of project management that are really critical to think about at all of those points. So that being said, I was going to just talk about a couple of my my go-to strategies. They were completely out of context, in terms of, I'm not presenting a comprehensive project management framework. I'm picking out a couple things that I don't do a project without these things. And this was true in my former position. These are things that we built into every project. These are also things that are true for me on my own. Before I go into those, well, I guess we're recording. I'll do the questions at the end, but basically that's where I'm starting from. And I'll talk just very, very briefly about what these 5 things are. I am not going to have time to really get into the details of the how to do each of them, but I have resources available, and I'm happy to talk more with people about kind of the process of doing these things. But for now, I thought I'd just say, like, these are the things that have changed my practice the most. Before I do any of these, I just wanted to throw this in there. I didn't make it one of my top 5 because for me, this is just a really foundational piece of the project, which is this work breakdown structure, which in project management is just what we call this list of tasks that we're going to do. What is the overall list of things that we have to do to get a project done? And the very first thing I do in that planning stage is just try to list, like, what are all the steps? What are all the things I have to do? In project management, there are guidelines to help shape things like how much detail you put into this. Like, it doesn't have to be, on this day, I'm going to call this person about this thing. They're kind of buckets of work. But if we don't have that, there's a lot of the other project management techniques and tools that you can't really do well, that it kind of requires you to start with this. There's multiple ways that you can format it. The work breakdown structure on the left is exactly the same as the one on the right. So, depending on how visual you are or how what tools and techniques you use. But ultimately in project planning, you need to have that list of what are all the things I'm going to do. and to develop that in the planning stage. It may change. Like we all know that projects rarely proceed exactly the way we thought they were going to be, with exactly the right steps. But this is kind of a good starting point. And the reason why we want this at the beginning is that this becomes the central point that ties everything else together. It gives us the plan for what we're going to do. It can be a great foundation for doing cost estimates and timeline estimates, making sure that your assumptions about how the work is going to be done matches everybody else's assumptions about how the work is going to be done, and that the way that you see it in your head matches what your client or your collaborators were expecting it to be, and to identify things that maybe you missed in that plan. If you are working with other people, it becomes a good framework for starting to think about, well, which part am I going to do, and what are you going to do, and how are we going to do that together? It gives us a framework for tracking the status and preventing some of that scope creep. And I know you've done other sessions on scope creep. I'm not going to get too much into that today, or at all into that today, but basically it becomes the foundation piece of what the project is, and what is not included in that project. Once I have that, the things that I always do, and sometimes I do them more formally than I do for others, depending on how big the project is or how complex it is. And I should say that's a general caveat too. For project management to work, it has to be right-sized to your project, to your agency. And so while I do these things, this might be me just taking some notes. It may be me thinking about something. And sometimes it's me creating very formal documentation of it. So it looks different on every project, but I always have it. One thing that I always develop is a network diagram and do a critical path analysis. And all of this is, and maybe people know this, I can't see people. I apologize if I'm sharing tools and techniques that everybody knows and uses. And, but this is one of my favorites. And essentially it's just taking the work breakdown structure and turning it into more of a flow chart to show where the dependencies are, what things have to be done before other things can happen, and then building in some timeline. So in this example, this happens to be a network diagram of the work breakdown structure on the previous slide. It's a simplified version of a focus group based project. And you can see kind of in the middle, conduct focus groups, and all the things that have to be done before we get to that point. So, arranging food and childcare for participants, enrolling participants. I need to have my incentives ready. I need to have trained facilitators. And what this allows you to do is to just have that visual of how do all these things tie together? What has to happen before other things can happen? And then the numbers in parentheses are basically how many weeks were allocated to that task. And the shaded box is what we call the critical path. And the critical path means basically, if you look at kind of the beginning to the end and all the different things that have to happen, that's the path that takes the longest to finish. And so in this case, if you look, for example, at the things that have to happen before the focus groups can happen, recruitment is the one that is expected to take the longest. For this example, that I have a lot of things I have to do. It's going to take time to go out and, do the advertising and translate and get people signed up. The other things that I have to have done before the focus group are projected not to take as long. And the reason why that is important to know is it gives us a sense of, if today is busy and I'm trying to decide, do I want to get those recruitment flyers drafted, or do I want to be working on getting my team of facilitators ready and trained? I have time to get the other things done. It gives me a sense of how much time can I let slide before I impact my timeline. And to be able to work backwards from there and to make some informed decisions about where I can pause and where I can't. And will pausing at this step impact my ability to actually get the project done on time? There may be disruptions in my work plan that set me back a couple of weeks, and it may or may not be a big deal when it comes to producing the final report. So I always put something like this together just to have, I'm a visual person. And so I like to be able to kind of see and to be able to track where I am and to have that sense of where I have room to slide and where I don't. The second thing I do on every project, every time, is a risk management plan. One of the more interesting things that I did when I was still at that agency is I did a review of about 300 completed projects and looked at kind of what went well and what didn't go well. You know, and it very quickly came up that not only was there a challenge on every project, you know, no project ever went exactly the way we expected it to go without any challenges, but we would see the same risks over and over and over again. You know, like repeatedly we would see like, oh, we were going to do this data analysis, but the client didn't give us the file on time, or the file came, but it was messier than we thought it would be, and it took longer to clean it before we could analyze it. Things like that would just happen over and over again. It's like, so why do we keep expecting that that's going to go well the next time? You know, if it never has in the past, can we start identifying that and saying, okay, this is something that is likely to come up and to be a challenge. So on every project I do, and I do this with collaborators, sometimes I do it with clients, sometimes again, it's just me, but I take some time at the beginning and think through what are all of the things that could possibly go wrong on this project. And then prioritizing the ones that I need to do something about proactively. And prioritizing is based either on the likelihood that that risk is going to happen, or on the potential impact that that would have if it does happen. And then to really, again, like in that initial plan, build in the strategies to address those risks, which is sometimes reducing the likelihood of the risk happening. It may be reducing the impact of that risk, things like that. So every project I do, I write up a risk management plan and then a strategy for monitoring and managing. You may not think of everything. You know, I'm thinking of one example of a project that I did with someone that I knew, but I had never worked with her before. We sat down and did a risk management plan together. We focused a lot on this relationship. This is new. We haven't worked together. What are some of the things that that could happen in this relationship? And what will we do basically if one of us is unable to do the things that we said we were going to do? Or how do we make sure that we are working together cohesively? This was around January or so of last year. We did not identify the potential risk that she was going to get COVID and be knocked out of the 9-month project for 4 months. You know, it was a risk that blindsided us. So you may miss something, but I have found it very, very helpful to just plan for those risks rather than always feeling like I'm scrambling to fix something that came up. The third thing is I do estimating very differently than I used to, and this would be estimating budgets and estimating time. This is just one strategy that I use. Is I have a tendency to be an optimistic estimator. Again, because I assume everything is going to go easily and smoothly the first time, that I'm not going to be distracted by things when I'm trying to do the work, that it's all going to be clear and organized and on time. And you know, I'm going to write that big report, and I can write that report in 5 hours. And really, the report's going to take me 40 hours, but I always think it's going to take me 5. So I know that I tend to be always, I can do it faster than I think I can. I can do it more cheaply than I think I can. And so I try to be very disciplined in challenging the assumptions that I make around estimating and building things in to try to adjust for some of the error and adjust for some of the risk. So this is just one that I use a lot, is 3-point estimation, where if it's time or budget, you kind of calculate what's the most optimistic way that this is going to come out, what's the fastest that I can get this project done, or the cheapest that I can get this project done. What do I really think it's going to be? And then what would it be if all of these risks that I've identified actually come to pass? What would it look like then? And then I use that to adjust my estimates accordingly, so that I'm not, basically to give myself a little bit more confidence. The fourth one is I always do a communications plan on every project, very formally. Who am I communicating with? When am I going to do it? And just thinking through kind of that psychology of, I think my last position, sometimes it's like, oh, everything is going fine, so we don't need to have any communication with the client this week. It's like, do they know everything is fine? Do they know everything is on track? Where do we need to build in proactive communications within the team or with our partners to keep things on track? I do one on every project. And then the last one is I do a debriefing on every project, and taking some time at the end of a project or at the end of a phase of a project to really reflect on, how did this go? What worked well, what didn't work well? If I could do it again, what would I have done differently? And then organizing that information so that it's more readily available to me next time, to try to continually improve my practice of, you know what, I really messed this piece up. I should have communicated differently. I should have expected that this was going to be a challenge here. Those kinds of things. And I do this, again, sometimes just by myself. Sometimes I do it with the clients. Often I do it with collaborators. But it's, for me, the last thing I do on any project before I close it, before I just jump into the next thing, is take some time to pause and to reflect. So that's just a kind of a quick look at some of my favorite tools. I just want to mention some resources that I have available if they would be of interest. So I've done this series of tip sheets on project management for researchers and evaluators. I think I've got seven. So I've got one on an introduction to project management, how to develop work breakdown structures, how to visualize your timeline. That's doing the network diagram and the critical path, estimating timelines and cost, managing risks, strengthening communication, and then the debriefing. And then I've got 2 coming soon on negotiation skills for researchers and how to manage research project teams. They are available on my website, and I've put the link there. They're just downloads. They're things that basically I developed because I had done so much training on these topics in my last position, and I wanted to try to kind of solidify them. So